Try to get through this pretty quick tonight. I know a lot of folks always want to go through the flood. I like to study about it. Now, we looked at Noah found grace in the eyes of God, and then it begins in verse 9. The entire world is corrupt. Looking at a population at that time, some folks say it could be up to 7 billion. You'll say, well, that's impossible. 1966, the world's population was 3 billion people. All right, we live our average age around 75 years old. 1974 was 4 billion. 1987 was 5 billion. And in 1999, it's 6 billion. Our current population, world population, is 7.6 billion, with people living only 70 years. Now, if you live 900 years, one person, it's going to be that many people. All right? So you're dealing with that many people. So, from creation to flood, all right? From the creation to the flood, you're dealing with about 1,650 years. From flood till now, you're dealing with about 4,800 years. So you're pushing around 6,100 years as far as the earth goes. Some people, if you watch National Geographic Channel, Biography Channel, History Channel, stuff like that, they're going to tell you that the world is billions and billions of years old. I don't believe that. You're dealing with around 6,100 years old as far as the world goes. The thing that you have to understand is when you're dealing with the ark is that it is the largest vessel that has ever been built before the Queen, I think it was the Queen Elizabeth or the Queen Mary ship that came out in the 1800s. But up until then, it is the largest floating vessel that has ever been assembled. It is not a boat. It is a box. It is an ark. We'll look at that here in just a second. All right. Now, tons of notes. I have been writing all day long. All right. The key thing here is in verse 8 is going to be grace. It is the word grace. Noah is the 10th descendant from Adam. We learn more about him in 2 Peter chapter 2. He was a preacher of righteousness in a world that was unrighteous. The first time he had kids, he was 500 years old. He had Ham, Shem, and Japheth. He is the grandson of Methuselah. His dad was Lamech. And he is a very interesting character. About the only child that you hear much from is going to be Shem. And we'll look at him here in just a second. We'll find out how old he was when the flood actually came. At verse 9 it says, and now these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and a perfect man in his generation. That is, when it says perfect, it does not mean he was sinless. When you are comparing what Noah was living in, he seemed perfect. He was perfect. If the world is full of violence, is full of corruption, every imagination, and their hearts are on evil continually, Noah is going to be considered a perfect man in his generation. Now, if you're dealing, let's just say 7 billion people, one person, does it say that his family was righteous and just? Who was righteous and just? Noah. Okay? But he says that he was a preacher of righteousness according to 2 Peter chapter 2. All right? Now, you remember it takes 120 years. Everybody should know that about the ark. Noah preached righteousness for 120 years. This is something very interesting. We'll get to it here in just a second. I don't want to jump the gun. But it says he was just and he was perfect in his generation. And Noah, the last time we've seen someone do this, actually walk with God, talk with God, is going to be a man by the name of who? Who? So if he is the 10th descendant, imagine how corrupt the world is. If the last person that walked and talked with God... Now you remember that people started calling upon the name of the Lord. But you have Adam and you have Noah that are actually walking with God. Okay? Now, and it says that he walked with God. Something very interesting. Now it says, and Noah begot 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. All right? Shem is the only son that we know really a lot about. If you'll go to Genesis chapter 11, verse 10. Genesis chapter 11, verse 10, it says, now these are the generations of Shem. As far as Ham and Japheth goes, we don't know too much about them. We know that, I believe it was the descendants of Ham. His descendants actually settled on the Mediterranean. They were in Asia Minor. They were some of the first settlers in Europe. But as far as knowing a lot, we don't know too much except for Shem. Shem was 100 years old, and he begot Echephated 2 years after the flood. So if he's 100, 2 years after the flood, okay, how old was he when he was on the boat? 98. He was 98 years old when he got onto the boat. You know, when we see those movies of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, they're like 19 or 20. This guy's 98 years old. All right? But Shem lived after he forgot 500 years. So he lived, if he was 100 and he lived another 500 years, when did he die? How old? Awesome. All right, 600 years old. So now we know that he was 98 years old. As far as kids go back then, you would have them pretty rapidly, right? So Ham, Shem, and Japheth was probably, all of them was in their mid to late 90s probably. Early to late 90s when they got onto the boat, or to the ark. I keep saying boat, onto the ark. I'll probably say that a bunch. You just have to excuse me. So, we have Ham, Shem, and Japheth. All right? Now, verse 11, the entire earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. That is plumb full. That is running over. You remember we studied that in the book of Revelations. That when God would pour out His bowls, they were filled. His wrath was filled in those bowls. So there was nothing good on the earth at that time. Out of all of these people, He finds one individual that is just and upright, and his name is Noah. And he is the descendant of the first sinner, which is Adam. And it says, and the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled absolutely with violence. If you look that word up, it's a very strong Hebrew word. The next time you actually see that word again is going to be in the book of Matthew. It's also going to be found in the book of Luke. It is the Greek word that is used to describe the madman of the Gadarenes. And when you describe the madman of the Gadarenes, he was someone who could not be bound. He was a wild man. He was a violent individual. So basically, if you look at verse 11, you're dealing with 7 billion madmen of the Gadarenes. It is absolutely corrupt. Now, the next time you see the world that is going to be like this, we studied about it several months ago, is going to be during the 7-year tribulation. So you have Genesis that is filled with violence, and then coming up, we don't know when God raptures us out, it's going to be filled with violence again. We think that the world is bad, don't we? But we don't know anything. And you remember that Jesus Christ says that before this all happened, it's going to be like the days of Noah. People are eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. They're just living their life. So this is what people are doing. And it says, and God look in verse 12, upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. All right, we've got the word corrupt in verse 11, violence in verse 11. In verse 12, we have that word corrupt again. And now we have it again in verse 12. It's corrupt. Is it a good place to live at that time? All right? You must remember there's absolutely no law in this time. There's no police officers. There's no judges. There's no jury. It was every man can do what he wanted to do and what was right in his own eyes. It's almost kind of like when you're dealing with the book of Judges, everybody did what they thought was right. So when you're dealing with Genesis, it says, "And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh," when you're dealing with all flesh, you're dealing not only with humans, but what else are you dealing with?
All living things.
Everything that takes the breath of life. Do you remember that Jesus Christ, God said, "I am going to destroy everything." Everything on this earth is going to be destroyed. Man and beast. So you're living in a world with everything that takes a breath of life, that can walk, that has a heartbeat, is violent. It says that it was filled with violence. So the world, the earth is filled with violence. And then it says all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. So now we go to verse 12. God is going to speak to Noah. "The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence." You notice how the writer of Genesis keeps going back to that word violence and being filled and corrupt. There's nothing good. The only thing that is good that is found on the earth at that time is a man by the name of Noah. That's it. One person. And it says, "And God said unto Noah, the earth is, behold, is corrupt, and for all flesh corrupted his way. And God said to Noah, the earth is filled, the end of all flesh, is near. It's come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy." All right? "I will destroy them from the face of the earth." Look back in verse 7. And it says, "And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast." Okay? "And creeping things and the fowls of the air." He says, "I am going to destroy." If you look that word up in the Greek, it means to erase something that has been pinned down. It means to, I know kids don't use pencils anymore, but when you write something down on a piece of paper, you take that eraser and you erase it off, there's no evidence that was ever there. Now you can take white out and rub it on, but you can take the white out and scrub it off, but you can still see it under there. So the word destroyed back in the Hebrew is going to be erased. Now, if you've got 7 billion, I see a pencil. If you got 7 billion people and they're all been drowned, all right? Here's the argument with scientists. Where's all the skeletons at? Well, yeah.
What about all the fish? The fish not all die too?
It said it will destroy all flesh.
All flesh off the face of the earth. Okay? Now, if you look at this, all right, it says, "I am going to destroy." That word means to erase, correct?
Doesn't it say destroy and the earth?
Everything's going to be destroyed. Let's going to read it again. "And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I've created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing, and fowls of the air." Does it say anything about fish? Huh? Where does fish live at? Obviously, they're not going to be destroyed. Okay? What is going to be destroyed is going to be, look at it again, man, beast, creeping things, fowls of the air. Creeping things are like bugs or animals or dogs and cats and things like that, things that creep around. And fowls of the air. He is not going to destroy the earth, but he is going to destroy the things that are on the earth. Okay? Now, where's all these bones at? If God is going to erase something, to destroy something, he is going to erase all evidence that he has ever been there. And there's something else you need to understand when you're dealing with this. God always warns, all throughout the Old Testament, God always warns before he brings judgment. Babylonian captivity, Syrian captivity, he told them, you better get back with God, obey my commandments, or I'm going to destroy you. How long does he wait before he destroys the earth after he tells Noah? So you know what that is a sign of? That's God's grace. I told you, and here's what's going to happen if you don't. All right? Now, 95% of the fossils that have been found, 95% of the fossils that have been found are only fossils that contain marine life organisms, things that have a shell on them. Okay? 5.75% of the fossils that have been found have only been plant fossils. So that leaves us with 0.25%. 0.25% are vertebrates, and most of those are fish. Do you know how many fossilized human remains have ever been found? It's going to shock you when you find out. 4,000. That's it. Completely intact. 4,000. So when God destroyed man, beast, creeping thing, what did he do? He wiped it out. It's gone. It's absolutely destroyed. That is how God's judgment is. There was no trace evidence left whatsoever that man was ever here except for 8 people. It's absolutely amazing, isn't it? When God says, I'm going to destroy them. We'll get into a thought that I had here in just a second. Now, God said unto Noah, all flesh is come. The end of all flesh. There's going to be a stopping point. And behold, I will destroy. Just look at that word up in your Strong's Concordance or your Vine's dictionary. It's almost like when you take a bunch of dynamite, wrap it together, and throw it at something, there's not going to be anything left. Okay? He does not. Now, this is interesting. Now, remember, it has not rained. Make thee an ark, not a boat. Okay? The word ark actually means box. And I gave you what this thing is going to look like. It actually means box. Okay? It looks like I always thought it looked like a tissue box. The next time you see that word ark is actually going to be in the book of Exodus. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Now, the word ark, that's used, the Ark of the Covenant, is a different Hebrew word. But the word ark in the book of Exodus, it is going to be, let me see if I can find it. And she took him, all right, Exodus chapter 2, verse 3. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him a ark. It's only 2 times you'll find that. All right, so it's basically a box. It's a floating vessel. It makes him an ark. What is interesting is that Moses was responsible because of God, okay, for bringing together a new nation, which is the Jews. Moses was. Noah was responsible because of God for saving not a nation, but for saving mankind that would later become that nation. And both of those individuals was put in an ark to save them from judgment, to save them from drowning, to save them from death. So there's some similarities there. But God tells him, he says, I want you to make me an ark. Now, 450 feet long is what it is going to be. He gives us the dimensions here in just a second. It's going to be 450 feet long. If you go by a cubit, a Hebrew cubit, it's going to be about 18 inches. The Egyptian cubit, they measured a cubit, the Egyptians did at 20. But since you're dealing with Hebrews, we're going to go 18 inches. 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high is basically how this thing's going to look. It's going to look like it's just a box. Everybody has an idea what this looks like. Okay? Now, make me an ark of gopher wood. We don't know what that is. We just know it's a durable, watertight wood. Okay? Probably equivalent to some kind of oak wood. But make me an ark. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. It's got to have rooms. Shalt thou make in the ark, and thou shalt pitch. The word pitch actually means covering, or to cover. Make thee pitch within, but you also make it without. Okay? So you have this floating boat, that's not a boat, this floating box. It's going to be 3 stories, and it's going to be covered with pitch. Now, you'll notice that if we're going to build a boat, all right, we're going to build a ship, we're going to have some things for it. Not an ark. We're going to have a rudder, have to have oars, and a steering wheel. Does the ark have either of those? This is not made to. This box is not made to be driven. It's basically made just to float. That's it. Can't steer it. Can't navigate it. It's just there on the water, and it goes wherever it wants to go, wherever the sea puts it. It's flat on the ends, flat on the top, and flat on the bottom. Okay. There's years ago. Actually, once in a lifetime, National Geographic put out an issue about Noah's Ark, and they had some shipbuilders to talk about this. And these shipbuilders said that Noah's Ark was basically, you could not sink this thing. They said that it would have to actually be vertical, standing up in the water like this before it would sink. And they said it probably wouldn't even sink then because it would fall back either on its top or its bottom. They said that the hardest thing to turn over, to flip over, is something that's flat on the bottom. They said if you have something that's absolutely flat, it takes more manpower to push this thing over because you got to roll over. You got something flat. If it's a boat, you're basically sitting on something that's at an angle, and it doesn't take too much to turn it over. But they said with Noah's Ark, it was basically you could not sink this thing because if it would turn up, it would fall either on its side or its back, but it wasn't going under. So God knew exactly what He was doing. Exactly. And this is how you're going to fashion this. And it's interesting that Noah never questions Him, does it? Has there ever been an ark built before this? You notice Noah goes, it's an ark. And it says, and this is the fashion which thou shalt make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits. The breadth 50 cubits, and the height is going to be 30 cubits. So that's where you get your 450, your 75, and your 45. Okay? Now, this is something that is kind of interesting. A window, all right, shalt thou make to the ark. In a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark. So you have a window and a door, all right? Of the ark shall set in the side thereof, with the lower, second, and third stories thou shalt make. So you have this box that's 450 feet long, and you got 3 levels in it. That's it. Okay? And he is told to put something. He is told to put a window. Thou shalt finish it above. A cubit, a window. A window shalt thou make the ark. And the door of the ark thou shalt set thee thereof. So you have a window and you have a door. Now, when you're studying this, you also have to kind of use some common sense. And we're going to look at how many animals you can stick in this thing. Try to tonight. Let's just look at this. The total volume of capacity for this thing is 1,400,000 cubic feet. That's how much you can put inside. That's the volume of it. All right, which is equal to 522 standard livestock cars that is pulled by trains. One livestock car, and the average mammal is about the size of a sheep. Okay? One livestock car, you can fill 240 sheep in just one of them. If you take 522, you can fill 125,000 sheep in these. So is it capable of him putting these animals in the ark? Absolutely. Now, and it says, of all of this, if you put all of these animals on there, and according to what they think, it would weigh, just the weight of the animals in there would be 14,000 tons. All right? The total size of the ark is 1.5 million cubic feet. All right, so you got 3 stories. Now, and it tells us that you've got a window and a door. Now, you got to use some common sense on this. On your sheet, you'll notice that at the top of this ark, it's got little, right here. If you've got something that's 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high, and you're packed full of animals, do you think one 18-inch window is going to be enough ventilation? All right. Now, what they think. Now, remember, you got to use common sense. All right. And Noah had some common sense, or God wouldn't have went to him. They think that all along the top of this ark, okay, they put on the outside, on top of this ark, they would put 18-inch windows, just all on the top. Because one window that's about like this, that's not enough. Okay? So you have to use some common sense. So more than likely there was windows all around this ark for ventilation. And they don't believe that the top of the ark was flat. They think that the top of the ark was like a roof, was pitched over these windows, so when it was raining for 40 days and 40 nights, the water would not come into those windows, but it would run off the ark. So you got to kind of use some common sense on this. But as far as the door goes, there is just one door. And people will say, oh, that is symbolic of Christ. You're coming into the ark and things like that. If you want to go that way, fine. Because Jesus Christ says, I am the door. Okay? But it says you got the windows, and I believe it's going to be like this drawing. You've got hundreds of these little windows all around the ark. But then you have a door. And it says, and you're going to put the door, but you're going to have a lower, a second, and a third stories to make it. All right? Now, so you've got all of these animals on this, that's going to be on this ark, and then you're going to have something that is very important in verse 17 and 18. And behold, once you get that done, Noah, once you get this ark built, okay? Now this is something that is also very interesting. Noah is going to have himself and Ham, Shem, and Japheth to build this. How many people is that? Do you honestly think that 4 people can build something like this? 4 people. Some people think that he actually went out and hired people to help. When I told that, could be possible. Okay? But all we know is guess who's getting on that ark? The only people that God says is getting on that ark. I want you to look. And behold, I, even I, will do bring flood of waters upon the earth to destroy everything. All flesh is going to be destroyed. Wherein is the breath of life from under the heaven? Everything that is in the earth shall die. Everything. There's no hope. But with thee I will establish my covenant, or you can put in parentheses a promise. I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, you, your sons, and your wives, and your sons and their wives. All right. He's got Ham, Shem, Japheth. They've got wives. That's 4, 5, 6. And you got Noah and his wife. How many people's that?
8.
How many people's getting on that ark?
8.
Well, what about the other 7 billion folks? Chris, that's not fair. God say, Noah, sir, here's what I want you to do. I want you to set up a big old tent. Get you a tent revival going. Let's get all these folks saved and get them in the ark. Not going to happen, is it? Now, a lot of people say that don't sound right. That's unfair. The only people that's getting on that ark is 8 people, not 9. That's it. That's all. And who established those 8 people getting on the ark? Noah or God? God. Did Noah have a say so in it? Well, God, what about my next door neighbor? I mean, he's a pretty good guy. You know what's sad? Now we'll kind of go over this again. When those floods is coming, do you know that they was mamas out there with teeny little old infant babies that had just been born? Was they going to get on that ark? Do you see how violent the world is that they are living in? And how violent the world is going to be if you're stuck here? But God tells him, he says, I'm going to establish a promise or a covenant that the only people that's getting in that ark is you. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort thou shalt bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee, a male and female. Obviously we know why, so they can reproduce. Of fowls after their kind, cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing of his after his own kind. 2 of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. And thou shalt, and take thee unto thee all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee and for them. Man does not become meat eaters until when? After the flood. Okay? Man does not become meat eaters till after the flood. So they eat herbs and they eat fruits and things like that. But what about the animals? Don't lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, eat meat? You know what they ate before this?
Herbs and grass.
There's vegetarians. Okay? Now, here's something that is also interesting. Well, we'll look at it here in just a second. Now, it says, and thou, verse 21, and take thou thee of all food that is eaten, thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee and for thee. Thus did Noah, according to all God had commanded him, and he did so. No grumbling, no complaining, no, this ain't fair. How am I going to do this? Noah said, all right, let's do this. Now, as far as symbolism goes, if you're into symbolism or types of the Bible, this could be, and you hear two types for this. The first type is the ark is going to be a type of Christ for the Christian. All right? Because he is the door, and if you get into the ark, you are going to avoid his wrath, which is his judgment, which is hell. Another group will say, well, no, this is not a type for the Christian. This is a type of the Jew. Okay? Being protected during the tribulation, during the judgment. And Enoch is a type of the church that is taken out. Either way you want to look at it, that's fine. If you say, well, Chris, I don't believe that's any symbolic, I want to take it at face value. I'm just going to go with that 8 people will say, great. Okay, if you're not into the symbolism or anything like that, that's fine. But you can look at it as it is either Christ is that door, he is our ark, we get in, and we avoid his wrath according to Romans. Or it is a type for the Jew. You say, well, there's no Jews at this time. Eventually, you have Abraham coming out of this lineage. I mean, if Noah's going to die, there's not going to be any Abraham, obviously. So, you can look at it in those two ways. Now, keep in mind that everything that is going to happen now, okay, is absolutely true. This is not fairy tales, okay? And you'll notice, I don't know, there's not one in here. I think Danny, when she was a little bitty baby, she had a bumper. I think she had a crib. She had a bumper with Noah's Ark on it, or she had a photo in her room with Noah's Ark. I can't remember. And it was always a neat little boat. You got Noah and his family smiling, and happy, and you got these animals walking on, and they're smiling and happy. Get that out of your mind. This is, you got to get this thing done. You got to get this thing done. It was hurry, hurry, hurry. Noah knew, this is what is interesting, Noah knew that while he was up there building that ark, that everybody around him was fixing to die. That judgment was going to come to every one of those people. How he did this, I don't know. How he could do this, and you know that people would come by and they'd make fun of him and aggravate him. But we're going to look at verse 1 of chapter 7, and then we're going to end. And the Lord said unto Noah, come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteousness before me in this generation. Nobody else, right? If you're looking, I think it's in 2 Peter chapter 5, chapter 2, verse 5. Let me see if I can find it real quick. For some reason, that is the hardest book for me to find. Somebody finds it before me, holler. You got it? Let me see it.
I don't know what chapter it is.
2 Peter chapter 5, verse 2. And it says, 2 Peter chapter
I'm on chapter 1.
2, verse 5. No, it says 2 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. And spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, So he is described as being a minister, right? He is a preacher of righteousness. Who does he preach to? Who?
His family.
His family. Who are the ones that are saved to get on that ark? His family. If God tells him, listen, Noah, the only people that's going to get on this ark is your bunch. Why would Noah go out and preach righteousness to a bunch of folks that's not going to get on the ark? You say, well, that's mean and that's cruel. That's the kind of world that they are living in. The reason that that mom and those kids and those daughter-in-laws got on that ark is because Noah preached righteousness to them, and they believed it. That's why they got on the ark. I know some of this, I hope you're enjoying this. I really do. A lot of it, I don't want to say have to think outside the box, but just like with the windows and things like that, you kind of have to use some common sense. I could not imagine being cooped up for a year and they're going to be in the ark for 371 days. I couldn't imagine being cooped up with 371 days with a dog and a cat in the house, much less thousands of animals.
This must have been engaged.
Oh, it would, yeah. Noah be hanging his head, oh my God, I'm about to die. Yeah. It would be, when they let that door down, it'd be like, so maybe you guys are enjoying this. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you and we thank you. Thank you, dear God, for your mercy and your grace. We thank you, dear God, for this book that you've given us to study. And we ask you, dear God, to not only open our eyes, but open our minds and our hearts, dear God, to this book. Help us, dear God, that when we study it, we take it serious, dear God. But, dear God, we also ask that you bring us together as a church while we study this. We ask you, dear God, to be with Miss Faye and what she's going through. Be with the family of Chris. And for this prayer request that we have heard, both spoken and unspoken, we lift those up to you. In your name we pray. Amen.